Well, good morning. It's Destry. Welcome back to my Oregon yard. Today we are gonna do just some general garden maintenance stuff, right? Some yard maintenance. One of the main things I really need to get done today is some deadheading. So I thought I would take you along for the ride and talk to you a little bit about what plants you should and shouldn't deadhead or why that's important. And then basically just kind of get some things done around the yard. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first plant I'm gonna tackle today is probably the biggest plant and the one I've been putting off the longest, which is my rose. So I have this really beautiful blush colored rose, but it really needs a hard prune, a hard cut back. So I have my pop-up bag here. I've got my clippers, my gloves, my sun hat, and I'm just gonna kind of get after this rose today, and hopefully that will give me another flush of blooms, because roses are great for my cut flower bouquets, but right now they're not looking so great. So let me show you the rose bush. It's our first thing we're gonna tackle today. Here she is in all her glory. Just to give you an idea of how big this baby is, here's my pop-up bag. Here's our basketball hoop. So, I mean, it's almost the size of our basketball hoop. It's huge. But what ends up happening this time of year is this kind of situation. It's hot, and even these new buds that come up just kind of get scorched, unfortunately, which is too bad. But I'm just going to go through and give this baby a hard prune today. And what I mean by that is I'm not going to clip here, right? I'm not just going to go clippy, clippy, clippy here, here, here. I'm going to take this down to here. I'm going to take it down and get rid of that whole branch and really take this whole bush down by about a third maybe. I'll have to see as I get into it. And I might be sacrificing a couple blooms, but honestly, most of them are spent, right? And if I do this time of year, I've noticed that the whole bush will come back and it will flush again with some more blooms. Because right now, all I'm getting, I mean, here's one bud up there, but it's putting lots of energy into all these spent blooms, and it's just not good. So we're gonna go ahead and get after this bush today and trim it back, deadhead it, and get it ready for its second flush of the summer. Now, if I do see a few buds forming, then I won't take quite as much. I'm seeing a little bud here, and I'm seeing a couple right here. I don't know if you can see from there, probably not. So I'm gonna save those, but a lot of these I'm gonna take way down. I'm also looking for any leaves that have kind of this black spot, it's called. You see those little they look almost like burnt, but I'm gonna try to get rid of as many of those as I can. That's kind of a fungal situation. So, see, taking all of that big branch off. Same with this one. And when I'm clipping, I am clipping at a node. So a node is kind of where a new branch could start to come up, I guess. And I might have to cut some of these into smaller pieces as well as I go. But yeah, some of this I think is just scorch. I don't think it's actually true black spot, because it just gets so much sun here all day, every day. So sometimes they call this a rejuvenation prune on your plants. Roses are kind of one of those ones where this is a good idea, especially mid-season. Now I see a branch here that has quite a few buds, so I'm going to leave that. I've got one bud there. that whole branch. I'm going to take this whole branch. Maybe that bud will bloom. Got some buds there. So I'm trying not to go too willy-nilly, but I'm also trying not to be too precious with it, because I know overall this will be better for the health of this rose. The other thing I'm going to do today to this rose is come in with my hose and leave it dripping and just give it a really good soak. We don't have drip system. Ow. We don't have drip system hooked up to this rose yet, so I'm just going to let the hose drizzle basically throughout the morning here. Probably wouldn't do that midday, but at least for a couple hours, just to give it a really good soak. You could also apply like a second round of fertilizer. And when you're doing this kind of prune, like this kind of hard prune, I would suggest like some sharp shears. These are brand new. So they're giving me some nice cuts, clean cuts. Just looking in here. And when in doubt, I am clipping it. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and start working the other side of the bush because I've gotten this side pretty good. But you can see I'm kind of trying to keep things level as I go. This has got one bloom on it here, so I'm gonna leave that, but I'm trying to kind of keep things level. So I'm gonna flip the camera around to the other side. Oh, that's a thick one. So these right here, these little balls, right, that's gonna be the seeds. So the rose is if it starts getting those, it's gonna tell the plants like, hey, I'm done for the season. I'm putting on my seeds, and then I won't get any more blooms. So I definitely wanna get rid of anything that looks like that. Any of the rose hips that are starting to form. Gotta go. They gotta go. And this one has some buds, so I'm going to leave any of the buds that I see. And it's amazing when you do this, like those buds that are trying to bloom, within a day, I bet you by tomorrow I'll get new blooms because the plant will have enough energy to put towards those. Okay, so I think I'm done with that prune, so I'll flip the camera around and show you how it's looking. Here's a little bit of an after shot. So you can see there's still some kind of straggly ones that are poking way up, but that's because they have some buds up there. So I'm gonna try to take advantage of anything that's budded up and leave those. But again, once those bloom and are done, I'll take that stalk down so that it's kind of matches with the rest of the height of the bush that I tried to create. But yeah, there's quite a few buds. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and get the hose dripping on this guy. And with a good dose of water and all of that pruning, we're gonna have some flowers. I bet you by tomorrow or the next day. So pretty. So while we're on the topic of deadheading, I wanted to show you a couple other plants that I've already deadhead. Now these are Shasta daisies, and you can see I went through and took off all of the spent blooms on both of these bushes. And that's another really important one to deadhead. Now I might get a second flush of blooms, I might not. These are another Shasta daisy variety, and they're kind of more of this kind of like butter yellow color. These are proven winners, and I forget the exact name. But again, I took off all of the spent blooms. I do see one that's trying to push. So I want to get rid of any of those spent blooms to make more energy for the plant to use to, you know, flush more blooms. So I may or may not on Shasta daisies. Here's my other rose I need to get tackled today. Same thing with this one. Now this one's more of a landscape rose, which means the blooms are a little smaller and things like that. But I do want to go ahead and get this one pruned up. So this is going to be my next item of business today. But Shasta daisies, again, another really important one to deadhead. And if you've got a zone that's, you know, still has quite a bit of sun and summer left, you might get a second flush of blooms. This is another bush that I've already deadheaded. Now I used my little electric trimmers on this one, but this is a lavender. And you can see I didn't get every single spent bloom. I could come through and, you know, hand pick these. But instead what I did is I just took my shears and kind of tried to mound it into like an attractive, you know, kind of mound or shape. But I did take off, you know, a lot of the spent blooms. You can kind of see them down here in the landscaping. That again will help that plant not put as much energy to those spent blooms, but back to the plant itself. And then the dianthus that's out here. I also used my electric shears on all of my dianthus this year, and it worked like a charm. So I will show you those electric shears here in a minute, and I will link them below for you, but look how nice and tidy that looks now. And again, now that I've sheared it back, I might get a second flush of blooms. Now, usually the second flush isn't as glorious as the first, but still I might get another flush of those dianthus. This lavender bush is my next one to go ahead and shear back. This one I probably will save some of the, there's a lot of pollinators on it. There's a little moth over here. I don't know if you can see him. But anyway, I will probably save some of the spent blooms and kind of tie them together as kind of a dried lavender bunch. And maybe I'll even put them on the flower stand. But lavender is another one that it's important to do kind of that midsummer cut back. Now they're not going to bloom again for me probably, but again, it's important to the health of the plant to go ahead and deadhead these. I still see a few pollinators on here, but my guess is most of this is it's pretty dried out. And I can tell that because it's not that vibrant purple color anymore. It looks like dried lavender at this point. Smells amazing, but it's probably time. I'll probably wait another couple days, or maybe I'll even get in there today and shear this one back as well. Over here I have several mounds of Shasta daisies that I've already sheared back. These daylilies, I don't worry too much about deadheading them. Sometimes I'll come through and just, you know, pull off the spent blooms just to tidy them up a little bit. But what will kind of naturally happen is these sort of sticks will kind of they'll get all dried up and they're really easy to just pull out. So I would say daylilies are not one that's necessary to deadhead. Again, usually I just come through and kind of groom them. Now they will set seed. So you can see here these little seed pods, and I actually collected some seeds from my daylilies last year. I didn't get a chance to plant them this year, but you can collect seed from them and try to grow them from seed. But you can see here's another little Shasta daisy mound here and here that I've already sheared back. And again, I used those electric shears and they made really quick work of this. All right, so I think the next thing I'm gonna get after is that landscape rose. I'm gonna get after that rose, and then I'm gonna go across the street to my little auxiliary yard, I call it, and get after a little buddleia that I planted there last year before. So I'm gonna deadhead that too. So butterfly bush or buddleia is another one to deadhead, and if you want more blooms, and so I'm gonna go ahead and get that one done too. So let's get going on those two. So this butterfly bush, I planted a couple years ago, and unfortunately it's been kind of taken over by, it's got pincher bugs, I believe. So I gotta look and see if I've got a good solution for pincher bugs. But if I get in here and deadhead, it will flush again with blooms, and it is a nice one for cut flowers. It's a really pretty purple color. So buddleia or butterfly bush is another one that if you deadhead, it'll continue to bloom for you. So when you get that middle, there's like this middle bloom, and then on either side there's two little buds that want to develop. But this one unfortunately has quite a bit of damage from those darn pincher bugs. And again, usually the second, third flush of blooms isn't as impressive, but it still looks pretty. And we'll keep this blooming over here in my auxiliary yard, I call it. It's kind of by our mailboxes, and I kind of took it on as a project a couple years ago, just because, to be honest, I was tired of looking at it. It was just basically all weeds, and it was just horrible. And I told my husband, I'm like, I'm adopting this space. And none of the neighbors seemed to be doing anything about it, so I just pulled all the weeds. My husband, we just rebarked it actually just a couple days ago, fresh for this year, but we usually try to bark it every other year or so. And then I did plant a few things over here, and this was one of them. And so far it's done, you know, it's done pretty good. So here's what I mean about those three. So usually this first one blooms first, and then if you clip that one, you'll get the second two to bloom. This one's already, all three of them have already bloomed, but traditionally that's kind of how they grow. So again, up here, if I get this middle one, oops, I lost it though, and then the other two will continue to grow. Well, I could spend all day grooming this thing, but I'm not going to. Anyway, it's deadheaded. Let's move on. All right, my next item of business is this hanging basket. And you can see I still have some blooms on here, but this is the time of year where some gardeners call it the Chelsea chop. But basically, if you cut them back real hard, they might flush with another set of blooms, because a lot of this, here, let me cut this off and I'll show you. So this is some kind of like coral bells, but all of that is all little tiny, you know, things that the plant is saying, oh, okay, I'm done with my blooms. So I'm going to sacrifice a few blooms here, but I'm just going to get in here and just shear it down. And it is kind of sad, you know, it's kind of like, oh, well, but I had some blooms there. Now the other thing that's in this pot is lantana. And same with lantana. So these are all spent blooms. And if I just kind of shear this back, I might be able to get a second flush of blooms. So you can see this purple is really pretty, but a lot of this is dead. So I'm just going to get in here, kind of shear all this back. The other thing I could do is fertilize this, and that will also help it to rebound and possibly make some new blooms for me. But this kind of plant is just easier to kind of just chop the whole thing rather than worrying about, you know, deadheading specific little pieces of it. Now this side has a petunia, this red petunia. So same thing, if you pull out those little, like just the little spent flowers, that actually doesn't help anything. It grooms the plant, but really this right here, where you pull those out, that's where you would have to remove in order for that plant to like know that it's needs to keep producing. So again, the easiest way to do that is just to get in here, grab a hunk of it, and just shear it back. So I'm going to do that with both of these hanging baskets. I mean, I am looking to see if there's any buds, and I'm kind of trying to keep some of the blooms if I can, but if you just kind of chop it back, especially with perennials, I'm sorry, with annuals like this. So if your hanging basket is like looking sad and it's like stopped blooming, go in there and just shear it back. Just chop the heck out of it, fertilize it, and then chances are you'll get another flush of blooms. Now you have to do that pretty soon though. You don't want to wait till, you know, it gets too cold or anything. All right, I've got a second basket to do the same thing, so let's do that one next. So all my other hanging baskets have fuchsias in them, and I've already done this to my fuchsias, and I'll show you them in a minute. They're already starting to flush new blooms, so I'm hoping to get a second flush from my fuchsias. And again, sometimes the second flush isn't as impressive as the first one, but at least you can get, you know, a few more flowers going before the end of the season. So yeah, all these petunias, they've stopped doing anything. And again, I'm also checking the health of the plant. Does it look like it has any buggies? This one's looking pretty good. Yeah, I'm seeing a little evidence of some budworms. Now I have been spraying what's called BT for budworms, and especially petunias and coral bells. They really love to make a little home in there. And then of course aphids. I feel like I always get aphids. All right, so I'm gonna get rid of this whole branch. I'm gonna leave one little bloom there just for funsies, but the rest of it totally chopped back. These hanging baskets, these are my fuchsias, and it's kind of hard to see, but I've already done this technique with them. I sheared them way back, and you can see they're starting to push some new growth and some new blooms. So there's that one. This one I cut way back. It doesn't have any blooms yet for me, but again, with any luck, they will. And with some fertilizer, sometimes they'll push a new crop of blooms for you. So another annual that needs to be deadheaded in order to rebloom are snapdragons. So snapdragons are a little harder to figure out if they're done blooming, like if the bloom is spent. So I actually deadheaded a few snapdragons this morning and just threw them on the ground. So I thought I would show you kind of what they look like when they're ready to be deadheaded. So they kind of develop these little pods, and you can ask yourself, well, isn't that going to turn into a flower? If it's got that little like curlicue thing on the top, that means it's already bloomed. So hopefully that makes sense. So if you look at, see if I can find one to show you. I kind of went through this already this morning, but they will look like they have this little like tongue that sticks out. Here we go, here's one. And again, the more you cut, the better they'll do. But see how this one has these little tongues that stick out? So that tells me this one's done, right? So I can deadhead that. And I try to go down pretty far when I'm deadheading snapdragons. But they're another one that can be kind of tricky because you're like, well, is that a bud that's gonna come out? And the answer is no. So let me grab a couple more here. So again, see that little tongue that sticks out? Then you know they're done and you should get them out of there. So right in here, I have a few more Shasta daisies I'm gonna be cutting back. And you know, some of them are still looking okay. So it just depends on how careful you wanna be. If you wanna leave the ones that are still like looking all right, that's fine. Sometimes it's easier to shear them all back and then hope for that second flush, but you can be a little bit more careful. But this is what they're gonna look like when they're done. They just kind of look a little withered. The white of the petals will be shriveled up. And so when you see that, it's time to get in here and get rid of those spent blooms. So it doesn't take very long. I'm gonna spend a minute and just probably get rid of most of these. And even some that are like looking okay, like this one's okay, but you can see it's like on its way out, right? So while I'm doing it, I might as well get rid of it. The perennial I have in my yard that can be cut back pretty hard is this cat's pajama nepeta. Any kind of nepeta like this, you can see most of those blooms are spent, but I'm also noticing a ton of pollinators on this today. So I'm gonna skip that one. Now this one over here, I've already sheared back once, and it has flushed a second flush of blooms. You can see it's probably not as impressive. But when they start to get real dry and crispy, and when I notice that the pollinators have stopped visiting them, basically that's my cue that, you know, they're kind of dried up, they're kind of done. And then what I can do is just take like a whole handful of that, you know, gather it together and then just cut that back. But today I'm noticing a lot of pollinators still, so I'm going to leave it for the bees today. So another thing I'm going to be working on right now is this lavender bush. So you can see it's kind of like sprawling out, and I think it's trying to get more sun. Mostly all the blooms are done, right? They're looking crispy. I mean, there's a few fresh ones, but not very many. And there's no pollinators on this right now, so that's another cue to me that, you know, I can chop this back, and that will leave more room for my marigolds here, because I feel like it's kind of crushing some of the marigolds. And this is also a case of like overcrowding too, right? Like I have dahlias back here. I don't want to encourage powdery mildew or something like that. I want there to be lots of space in my garden, so I'm going to go ahead and chop this lavender back today. So here is the after shot of the lavender bush, and I did use this tool. It's from a brand called Worx, and I just sheared it back and made really quick work of it, and for some reason the video didn't work. I must have hit the wrong button or something, but I missed all the video footage of me actually shearing it back. But here is the after. It looks a lot better. I don't know that it'll flush again with blooms, but I think it's better for the plant. One thing when you are doing lavender though, is you want to be careful not to get too far down into like the woody stems. So I went about as far as I could without, you know, damaging the plant. And this little tool makes it really easy to like shape it as you're doing it. But I think it looks a lot better, and it's gonna give the marigolds a lot more room to breathe, and hopefully discourage any disease or anything like that. So it's looking really good. Here in this swoop in my backyard is another spot where I have used my little trimmer here to trim back my dianthus or my pinks. So just neatly, you know, makes them into these little rounded mounds. And every year they're getting a little bigger, right? They're like spreading and spreading. But you can already see I sheared them back probably 2-3 days ago. And look, they're already starting to push some fresh blooms. And it just, you know, for something that deadheads, like this is as big as the spent bloom is, like it's a kind of impossible to sit there and pick them all out. So I wait till they're, you know, not really blooming anymore. And then I just take, you could take some shears. I just like this tool right now, and I just gave him a haircut. Here's another one that's, again, it's already pushing some new blooms. So anything like that you could do with dianthus. Here's another dianthus. This is a different kind. And this one I have been just deadheading like by itself. So I've just been picking off the spent bloom. So I haven't done the whole like chop back to this one, but I definitely could, you know, and that also helps kind of like, it just kind of shapes it as well. So anyway, I just wanted to show you a few of my dianthus that I've already done the Chelsea chop and sheared back this year, and I think they're looking really good. Thing that I cut last night actually are all of my drumstick alliums. So I got them kind of stripped back here, and I'm letting them dry. This is our hot tub. I'm letting them dry here in the sun, and I'm hoping to use them for some dried florals, possibly some wreath making or something like that. But that's another thing that I've already cut back. So they were in this area, and I just cut them down to the ground as best I could, and I think that really opened up this area. I've got these beautiful asters that are trying to bloom, and I think those drumstick alliums, it just maybe isn't the best place for them, but they were really crowding this area, and I think it looks a lot better without them here. All right, guys, well, it is getting hot. The sun is high in the sky, and I am getting tired, but I think the last thing I'm gonna share back today or this morning while I'm out here working is this perennial. So this is a perennial. It's kind of like a creeping Jenny, but you can see it's gone to seed, and what I'm afraid of is that it's gonna drop seeds and I am gonna have ground cover everywhere. So before it gets any more further into making seed, I am gonna take my trimmers and just shear this back. Now, I have no idea if it'll flush another flush of blooms. I'm mainly doing this one because of the seeds. I don't necessarily want to have that ground cover all over, although it is pretty. So I'm going to go ahead with my electric shears and get that sheared back. I sheared it back. It's kind of sad. I really liked the way it looked, but hopefully I caught it before it, you know, totally went to seed. Otherwise, I'm going to have a lot of ground cover here next year. And I got to pick it up a little bit better. But anyway, another reason to cut things back. If you don't want things to spread and go to seed, it's important to chop them back. All right, Yardners, well, it's hot. I'm ready to be done for the morning. I've worked way past when I thought I was going to, but I'm gonna go in the shade. Hopefully this video is helpful to you to just, you know, think about cutting things back, whether it's annuals, perennials. There definitely are some things that benefit from being deadheaded regularly, just, you know, individually, or just chopping them back, right? And just doing that rejuvenation prune so that you could potentially get another flush of flowers before the fall. And now is the time to do it. It's August, right? It's hot in most places in the country. So go ahead, chop them back. Don't be afraid. Just, you know, do that rejuvenation prune, deadhead those things, and let them see what they do, right? See what they do. Chances are they're going to come back even more fresh and with some new growth. Doesn't hurt to fertilize as well. Anyway, I hope you found the video helpful. If you need me, I'll be hanging in my Oregon yard doing some yardening. I need to go inside and get some water. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.